Welcome back, everybody, to the Gonzaga-in-Florence 50th anniversary celebration here in Spokane. I hope you all know we'll be doing this again in Florence in the spring, and I hope many of you can join us there. My name is Pat Reese. I'm the campaign director for the university, and I've had the great honor during my 17 years at the university to work with many, many Florentines. And you are one of probably the most unique constituency group we have here, because whether you were here years ago or you just came back last semester, you use the same words to describe the experience, and that's something profound over a 50-year period. So thank you for being here. I hope you're having a great time with your friends. I want to kind of just line out the day for you so you know. After this, Pat Burke will do a lecture, Oktoberfest out on the lawn. One of our trustees, who's a Florentine, has developed a little business where you can buy t-shirts. Could you please stand up for me right there with your t-shirt in the red? Oh. Shop Giglio if you want to buy wine glasses that have Florentine stuff on it. Any kind of Florentine gear. You can see it out in the quad, and all of the proceeds will go to benefit scholarship support for our students. So I hope you'll avail yourself of that opportunity. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mercedes as if she needs an introduction. Professor Carrara began her work with the Gonzaga-in-Florence program as an Italian teacher while in graduate school for a master's in fine arts at Via Schifanoia. Is that right? Oh, look at that, Florence, the seat of the European University today. Her first classes included teaching Art History 1 and 2 in '76. Over the years, Ms. Carrara has taught Renaissance art, Introduction to Florence, and in 2005 received the first Gonzaga-in-Florence Award for outstanding achievement in teaching. She currently teaches Florence of the Medici with 2 in-class lectures and a Wednesday tour to the sites and museums studying in class. The other course is Roman Art and Architecture, where students take a weekend trip to Rome where the roles are reversed. They lecture in front of the pieces they have chosen to present, and Ms. Carrara is the student. Please welcome Professor Mercedes Carrara.
Well, I have decided that I'm going to give you a lecture as if we were about to have a midterm. Only that this time you're not psyched out. It is a lecture down memory lane. At the end, I want to see how many slides you remember. My subject today is contrapposto and motion in sculpture through the centuries. You know that that's a favorite word. Okay, so obviously, how did contrapposto begin? It began with the Greeks, but before that, we had the famous arrested walk stance that had been invented by the Egyptians. In fact, look at Mycerinus and his queen that we studied so many times. As you see, he has his left foot forward, and his wife Mycerinus. His wife has also her left foot forward, but they're not freestanding. They're attached to the stone relief from which they were carved. And then the Greeks truly started the freestanding statue. Let's look at 2 of them. The Kouros of Melos, as you see, is mid-archaic, and you notice the usual left foot forward. But this time, unlike Mycerinus and his queen, the artist has only left dead material right here between the fist and the thigh. Same thing here. Look at the improvement in just 20 years. You have Croesus or the Kouros from Anavisos. 20 years later, around 520 BC. They were both in painted marble. If you look at them, you can see that the artist is still experimenting with the body. They're not fully understood. You have the torso has that patterned look and that famous archaic smile that makes them look rather silly. but it was a way to give them that spark of life. So, now let's see, we remember. Remember, kouros is the Greek word for youth. And for the girls, it's kore. Now, if you see, these kouroi are nude heroes. They probably were either warriors or they were simply victorious in the Olympic Games that were started in Greece. In fact, you ran nude. The men would run nude, and after that, their statue was made. And they're also called, the kouroi are also called Apollo, because Apollo is the god of light and prophecy. So practically, they are deified because of their victory in the Olympics. And Croesus, right here, lost, as you see, the inscription in the National Museum in Athens tells you that he lost his life in battle. So he died a hero. And whenever you see a statue where the male, they have bare feet, that is called a heroic piece. I hope you remember. And this brings us to the early classic period. The famous Critias boy, around 480 BC, right after the end of the Persian Wars. And this was probably carved by the sculptor Critios. The symmetrical arrested walk of the archaic Croesus that you saw is totally gone. And if you look, one knee is higher than the other. That is, contrapposto makes the contrappose, forms an X on the figure. So, as you see, and it is really interesting, the Greeks caught it. Just notice how, when we start walking, if you are right-handed, you're going to start walking with your left foot. If you are left-handed, you will start with your right, and that's contrapposto. You can see the curve, and of course, they were always brightly painted. At this point, Megan, I hope you're here. This is the discobolus or discus thrower of around 450 BC. This is a Roman marble copy of a Greek bronze original by Myron. And he was the one that did this famous discus thrower. And now that I'm teaching Roman art and architecture, we're going to Rome on November 8th. And of course, Megan presented the discobolus last year. And so, as I said, I simply act as the student and they are my professors. So you see, he's gorgeous, so Megan is acknowledging it. And our next one is the famous Doryphoros, or spear bearer, by Polykleitos. That is, this is a Roman marble copy of a Greek bronze original by Polykleitos. Now, just think that this statue was found in Pompeii. In Pompeii, after it was unearthed in the 19th century. Remember, Pompeii had been totally buried under the ashes. And so, and the Romans adored to copy Greek statues, and this is one of the many. So he's standing in contrapposto, and he used to hold a spear. Again, they're barefooted, which means that they're heroic, they're divine, like Apollo. And then you see the change in dimensions. This is the apoxiomenos, or the scraper. Remember, they ran nude, and they would put oil over their bodies as they ran. Imagine the unpaved streets, the mess. And so, as you see, what is he doing? He's removing that grime with a strigil. That's what he's doing. And you immediately notice that he is much taller, because he was done probably by Lysippus, the original, and Lysippus was Alexander the Great's favorite sculptor. He never made a portrait. He wouldn't have a portrait made unless it was made by Lysippus. And Lysippus changed the canon of Polykleitos. Now it is no longer 7 heads, but 9. So you have a smaller head and a taller body. And then we haven't talked about girls yet. So this is, the girls were called kore. A kore is a girl, but the girls did not run nude. They ran with bikinis. And I'm not kidding. They had the mosaics in Piazza Armerina in Sicily show you the so-called bikini girls, which were the girls in athletic contests, and they are wearing the same type of bikini that we use today. So nothing is new ever, as I always told you. Now, if we look on the left-hand side, please remember that's a pediment, and that's a relief. Remember the pediments? And you have a gorgon. A gorgon was one of the 3 sisters that made you turn to stone. Remember, with snakes for hair. And she is in the so-called pinwheel stance. That is, she's in the action of running, but it's still archaic with a frontal torso and the profile legs. Now look at this one, the dying Niobid. It is also in Rome, and one of the girls presented it. Now, who's a Niobid? The Niobids were Niobe's children. They were all gorgeous. And so Niobe bragged about her children's beauty to none other than to the mother of Apollo and Artemis. And to brag in Greek mythology is dreadful. So what did these two do? Apollo and Artemis simply shot them all with arrows. So this is the moment in which the dying Niobid, she has been running to escape, but you see the arrow has just entered her flesh. You can see the pain. And you see how it is because of that movement of removing the arrow, the garment has fallen. So it is not, let's say, fully nude, but it is accidental. And this is the first time in which you have pathos, suffering with dignity. Remember? I hope you do. And then, so we've been doing archaic, classic, let's go Baroque. Look at the famous Laocoon group, which was signed by Agisander, Athenodorus, and Polydoros of Rhodes. And you have seen it in Vatican City. First of all, this group, the Laocoon group, was discovered in Rome in 1506 when Michelangelo was working for Pope Julius II. He had been called to Rome to build Julius's tomb. And so it made an enormous impact on Michelangelo. You can see the muscles, you can see the influence that this group had on Michelangelo. Now, you have that deep undercutting of the figure, which produces the chiaroscuro effects, the light and dark effects, the agonizing expression, the wide open eyes. But actually, when you look at it, the piece moves sideways. In fact, it was totally influenced by the famous great Pergamon altar, the altar of Zeus in Pergamon. Look at this relief of Athena and Alcyoneus right here. Do you see that it practically is the same thing as the Laocoon group, the same type of horizontal movement? And, of course, I just love this detail. As you see with the deep undercutting, the artist is able to manage to give you the idea of an aging person's skin and of this curly hair and his agonized expression, because I hope you remember that he was a Trojan priest, and he had warned the Trojans not to receive the wooden horse. And of course, Greek mythology always roots for the Greeks. So when he told them, marine serpents came and strangled him and his children. This one was discovered in 1863. And when it was before its discovery, it was the Laocoon that was regarded as the epitome of Greek tragedy. Instead, and this was also done by a Rhodian sculptor, and always influenced by the Pergamon frieze. But as you look, the Nike, or winged victory, invades the spectator's field. In fact, she is landing on the prow of a ship, and she's whipped by a powerful headwind. Look at the garment. Look at the wind blowing her garments. It is amazing. And obviously, you've seen it in the Louvre. Do you know that it is now being restored in the Louvre? And already people have offered €4 million for its restoration. Obviously, then we're in Florence. Then comes the Middle Ages, and nudity is totally abandoned. But when you get to the Renaissance, you cannot use the nude heroes just like that. You have to give them a Christian content. So that Kouros becomes David. And Donatello's Bronze David is the first freestanding nude statue since classical antiquity. That is, he's not the fully developed young athlete, but he's actually a 12-year-old adolescent, like the Idolino, the little idol, who was done at the time of Emperor Augustus. It was probably a lamp holder, but it was based on Polyclitus' 7-head cannon. If you look at him, remember when I explained it to you, it is very sensuous. See the feather caressing the thigh, and then he is holding the giant sword. Otherwise, you would think it is totally disproportioned. And then you could see the contrapposto. And then if you look at the Idolino that I took you to in the Archaeological Museum, this is rather similar in concept, not the athlete. And of course, then we're doing early, high, late to see the development. And of course, we are in front of Michelangelo's David. How many times were we there together? So it was commissioned by the Florentine Republic to be placed on one of the buttresses below the half-domes of the Florence Cathedral. He is barefoot, that is in the tradition of nude heroes, and obviously, Michelangelo probably read the Bible like Donatello had, because in the Bible it is said how David, after killing Goliath, proceeded to behead him with the giant's sword. Here, the thing is the same. That is, this certainly is not a 12-year-old. So that is not true to the biblical description. But if you see, what is he holding? You see that he has a leather pouch here with 5 stones, just like in the Bible. And I brought you this so that you can see Andrea del Castagno's description of David, where you see that same leather pouch with a handle. And obviously, I have to tell you this story because my nephew is here. When he was a child and he was spending the summer with us, I took him there because my brother had sent him. And he said to me, "That is a baseball pitcher." I had never thought of it. I thought, he is a stone pitcher, in fact. And so, if you look at him, obviously, when we say Michelangelo, no one ever dare say that there's something wrong. Well, that hand is awfully disproportionate. However, if you look at it carefully, there's a reason. First of all, notice the contrapposto and how the tree trunk reaches the knee. There's a very large space between the knee and the thigh. So that hand acts as a buttress. If you look at it from behind, it is attached. Now that we have seen this, then you see the leather pouch that Castaño showed you. You can see the handle. And obviously, he, as you see, is barefoot in that tradition of Greek and Roman heroes. And he was going to be placed here on one of the buttresses below the half domes of the Florence Cathedral, 40 feet above you. And of course, early, high, late. The same David, seen by 3 different artists. Our turtle Donatello. Well, the Ninja Turtles served a purpose. The David by Donatello, Michelangelo's David, and Bernini's David. As you see, Bernini's is actually hurling the stone, dramatic, like the Pergamon frieze. Then Michelangelo's is about to do it, and he's filled with adrenaline, ready to strike. And Donatello is just looking down, amazed at what he has done. So, in the early Renaissance, apart from the Davids, we have to start looking at figures in motion, but figures involving more than one individual. An animal, a person. And in fact, remember Verrocchio's Puto with the dolphin. This was done probably for a Medici fountain, probably for Lorenzo the Magnificent himself, and we saw it together in Palazzo Vecchio. Look at this. This is the time in which the Renaissance integrates motion and emotion, that is, motion and emotion in the figure, in the face. The little Puto, which is a winged spirit, is holding a dolphin. Verrocchio had never seen a dolphin in his life, but as you can see, if you look, he's standing in contrapposto, but it is that use of diagonals from the raised leg to the dolphin that it is meant to be seen from all sides. It's tiny, and we saw it together. And on the other side is Antonio del Pollaiolo. If you remember Pollaiolo, the chicken vendor, the son of the chicken vendor, it was done again for a Medici, probably Lorenzo the Magnificent. And you have 2 figures involved. I hope you remember that Antaeus was the son of Gaia, Mother Earth, and Hercules had to kill him, keeping him off the ground, because every time he touched the ground, his strength increased tenfold, remember? And so, look at how he is squeezing the life out of him. He's standing in contrapposto, and for the first time, you see that an artist has dissected cadavers to understand anatomy. And this brings us, we've done the Kuros, 2 figures, and now we're going to see another type of figure, which was a Michelangelo creation, the so-called figura serpentinata, the serpentine figure that wraps around itself like the snake. In fact, you see it here in the Medici Madonna, you see it in his Apollo or David, and you see it in the Genius of Victory. Now, let's look at this one. The Medici Madonna shows you the baby Jesus reaching towards his mother, who is breastfeeding him. Remember that Michelangelo always said that he learned his love of sculpture from his wet nurse's milk. And Apollo or David, we don't know, because he could be holding the lyre, it wasn't finished, or he could be holding that pouch, that leather pouch. Again, that serpentine figure. And the same thing for the Genius of Victory, where the Genius of Victory is stepping on a figure. As you know, if you remember Italian, victory in Italian is feminine, la vittoria. So he couldn't do a man. So he called it the Genius of Victory, il genio della vittoria. There you go. The serpentine figure then reaches its climax with Giambologna and then later with Bernini. So Giambologna's rape or abduction of the Sabine woman, as you know, is the original. This can only happen in Florence, right? The original is outside and the plaster model for it is in the Accademia. So, as you see, Giambologna, who was a Flemish sculptor from Douai and became Cosimo I's sculptor, was challenged by his fellow artists to carve a group of figures spiraling upward from a single marble block. And in fact, he has done just that. Now, why does he call it the rape of the Sabine women when we only have one woman? Because the relief, the bronze relief with the rape of the Sabine women is right here. And so, it is obviously the Mannerists always want to show you how good they are. Remember, that was their approach, is to show you their incredible technique. And in fact, you see, obviously, he did this challenged by his fellow friends, artists, if he could carve a figure, a group of figures that could fit inside a cylinder. And he carved it with no specific subject in mind. The subject, the title was given to it afterwards. Remember, I always told you mannerism is form divorced from content, because the important thing is to show how good you are. And he shows you how good he is. And in fact, look at how it has also been called the three ages of man, because you see the older person down below. It has also been called the rape of the Sabine woman because it is involved with the founding of Rome. And on the right-hand side, we have Bernini, Gian Lorenzo Bernini, the Baroque master. And in 2 weeks, we'll be there looking at it. The rape of Persephone. As you know, Bernini's father worked in Florence for a while, so Bernini knew this piece by Giambologna. And when he was working in Rome, he was commissioned by Cardinal Scipione Borghese to carve a statue of the rape of Persephone, the rape or kidnapping of Persephone. And what's going on? If you know the mythology, Persephone was the daughter of Demeter, Mother Earth, and Hades or Pluto decided to take her to the underworld with him because she was very beautiful. But Demeter started crying, and so winter entered the land. There was nothing to eat. But Persephone had not eaten the entire pomegranate. If you ate the entire pomegranate in mythology, you're stuck in Hades. Since she had not done it, then Pluto and her mother reached a compromise. Persephone would be with Demeter from March to September. And she would be with Pluto in the winter. So, look at that detail. There is no one like Bernini in handling marble. It's like soft, it's like butter as you look at it. And when you're in front of it, it is a statue just like the other one to be seen from all sides. You see on the right, you have the three-headed dog Cerberus, and you have her, the wind blowing her garment, and a tear coming down her face as Pluto grabs her. It's uncanny. And this is another incredible one by Bernini, Apollo and Daphne, also a beautiful myth. Apollo and Daphne were played a dirty trick by Cupid. Cupid threw a lead-tipped arrow to Daphne and a gold-tipped arrow to Apollo. Now, the gold-tipped arrow made Apollo fall madly in love with Daphne. The lead-tipped arrow made Daphne despise Apollo. So as you see, he's chasing after her, and as he has just touched her, she begs her father, the river god, to save her. And notice how Bernini gives you the idea of the bark growing around her, her toes growing roots, and look at that detail of the hair. The laurel tree is beginning. And then we continue towards the 19th century. And again, you have another group that is very famous, Auguste Rodin's The Kiss. Now, Rodin was impressed, extremely impressed by Michelangelo's unfinished pieces in the Louvre, the dying and rebellious slaves. And so, when he was asked to do the Gates of Hell for the Museum of Decorative Arts in Paris, the doors were never done. But he made various pieces from the gates, from the sketches, and one of them was this couple. These are Dante's Paolo and Francesca, only that they're not being tossed by a terrible wind in hell, as Dante explains in Canto 5 of the Inferno. They are bound together by their earthly passion. So Rodin has given him the rough, unfinished look of Michelangelo's prisoners. And so they are bound together by this earthly passion. And the final one, we get to the 20th century. And we get to the famous Umberto Boccioni and his futurism, the unique forms of continuity in space. As you know, the futurists wrote a manifesto of 1910, Marinetti, but then in 1912, they also wrote another one on sculpture. And they say that the Nike of Samothrace is nothing. Nothing compares to the roaring automobile. Now, as you see, so he says we should put an incredible, let's say a Ferrari, inside the Louvre, we can dismiss the Nike. Remember, I always told you, don't call her Nike, because those are shoes. The Nike is winged victory in Greek. So if we look, even though he said that there was nothing like the roaring automobile, we cannot help but see how much Boccioni owes to the Nike of Samothrace. And the Italians have thought so, because as you know, Boccioni's unique forms decorates the 20-cent euro piece. Thank you. I'm done. Any questions? Do you have no questions? Are you doing like at school? Can't you ask me questions? No. Oh well, thank you.
Why don't you tell us a couple of your favorite stories about taking some of the classes or some of the groups to some of these things?
Oh no, Phil is right. This is a very cute story, actually. It was my first year as a professor, more or less your age, as some of you remember. And in comes one of the students that year. His parents had a ranch in Montana. So he came to visit his son. And he had Stetson hat and boots. And we were in front of David. And he says to me, "Is this the real McCoy?" I had no clue what the real McCoy was. Because I was raised, I went to college on the East Coast, and that's a very West Coaster. So, but of course, I have to know, so I went to the Webster's Dictionary, and I learned that McCoy was a famous wrestler on Western fairs, and that he, every time that there was a fair in the West, he would say, "Come and fight with the real McCoy." So I went home and I said to my husband, "You have to take me to Vegas to see the real McCoy." I have never seen it. Any other questions? Well, then this, at 2:30, then I'll be doing portraits. And some of it is autobiographical.